Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. Who has not yet subscribed to my channel, kindly subscribe and watch the videos related to this chapter. Okay, in last session we learned about the asexual reproduction. In today's session we are going to learn about the vegetative propagation. It is a method new plants are produced from the vegetative part of the plant like root, stem or leaf. Okay, these are the root, stem and leaf. These are called as the vegetative parts of the plant. Okay, from roots we get dahlia, sweet potato. These are the vegetative parts of the some plants which we get from the roots. Okay, and from stem we get potato, ginger, and from leaf bryophyllum and begonia. Okay, plants produced from vegetative propagation produces flowers and fruits earlier than those produced from the seeds. Okay, here in vegetative propagation what happens is the plants which we produced from the seeds, okay, they will take much more time for the flowering and then for the seed for the fruits. Okay, by this process means the vegetative propagation, these plants will not much more time compared to the seeds. They will propagation means the vegetative propagation, they will produce what flowers and fruits earlier than those produced from the seeds. And next it also helps in the propagation of plants which do not produces seeds like rose, jasmine and banana, etc. Okay, vegetative propagation can also be done artificially by these three methods, which are those cutting, layering and grafting. By doing this method, it is a kind of art. Okay, means it is a kind of art for the vegetative propagation where they will not take much more time to get a flower and fruit. Okay, which are those methods? Artificial methods, cutting, layering and grafting. Okay, now let us learn how the stem cutting is done and grafting is done and layering is done. Okay, in stem cutting, how it involves cutting a part of the stem and planting it in the soil to allow the growth of roots and buds into shoots. Okay, what we do here is where we will cut the any part of the stem, and planting means we will cut the part of the stem of the any plant. Then we will plant that stem into the soil to allow the growth of the roots and buds into the shoots. For example, sugar cane, pear and china rose. Okay, I hope you all have done in your home by planting this by using this method. Okay, next second one is grafting. In grafting, what we do is the stem or bud of two best quality plants is combined to form a new plant. Okay, it means that one plant is selected that is of the good quality, and then the another plant that both will be combined and to form a what new plant. For example, guava, apple and mango. Next, layering is in this method what we do here is the lower branch of the plant is bent and covered with soil. Once new root starts developing on the branch, it is cut from the parent plant and allowed to grow as an individual plant. Okay, what here is any part of the plant that is bent and covered with the soil, that has to be covered with the soil completely. And when we covered with that soil, what happens? The root starts developing on the branch where we tie that covered with that soil. What happens? The development of the root, the new root takes place. By that time, what we will do? We have to cut from that parent plant. Okay, we have to cut down that parent plant and allow to grow as an individual plant. Then we have to plant that plant inside the soil to grow an new individual. For example, here is rose and jasmine. In this way, layering is done. I hope you understood the vegetative propagation, this method, cutting, grafting and layering. Okay, now let us learn sexual reproduction in flowering plants. Okay, reproductive parts of the flower. Okay, now let us learn the reproductive parts of the flower. I hope you have learnt the parts of the flower in your lower classes. Okay, now let us learn one by one. The stem and pistil are the reproductive part of the flower. Okay, you all know that the stem and pistil are the reproductive parts of the flower, and stamen is the male reproductive part. It produces what? It will produce the pollen grains in the anther, which contains the male germ cell. Okay, male germ cell is also known as what? Male gametes, that are nothing but the pollen grains. Okay, pistil is the female reproductive part here. It produces what? It produces ovules in the ovary, which contain the female germ cell. That is nothing but what? The female gamete. Okay, what all things it will contain? The reproductive part of the flower, stamen, anther and ovary. Stamen is known as what? Male reproductive part. What it will produce? It will produce the male gametes. Then pistil is the female reproductive part. What it will produce? It produces ovules inside the ovary. This is all about the reproductive part of the flower. Okay, now let us learn pollination. The transfer of pollen from the anther to the stigma of the flower is called as pollination. Okay, here the transfer of what? Pollen grains. Pollen grains are nothing but the male gametes, and from the anther to the stigma, from the anther to where it has to pass, it has to pass through the stigma. Stigma is nothing but the female reproductive part, means the pollen grain has to reach the stigma part of the flower. That's why they call it as the transfer of pollen from the anther to the stigma of the flower is called as what? Pollination. Okay, it takes place by wind, water or insect. Okay, means the pollination, the pollen grains are transferred with the help of the wind, water or insect. Okay, if the pollen grains, now let us learn the what is self pollination and cross pollination. Okay, if the pollen grains are transferred from the anther to the stigma of the same flower, it is self pollination. Okay, self pollination is nothing but the name itself indicates. Self pollination means the plant, the flower which will pollinate by itself. It means the pollen grains are transferred from the anther to stigma of the same flower. Same flower, if the male gametes reaches the female gamete, is called as what? Self pollination. And if the transferred from the anther to the anther of the one flower to the stigma of the another flower, it is called as what? Cross pollination. Cross means it is one flower to the another flower. Okay, here they what they mentioned here is transferred from the anther of the one flower to the stigma of the another flower, means the pollen grain has to reach the another stigma part of the another flower. That's why they name it as a cross pollination. Pollination takes place by the insects, wind and water, etc. Okay, insect is nothing but the pollen grains will attach to the wings of the insect. They will go and sit on the another flower. In this way the pollen grains will transfer from one flower to the another flower. In this way cross pollination takes place and the pollination also occurs. Okay, I hope all you understood about the pollination, what is self pollination and cross pollination. Okay, in next session we are going to learn about how fertilization takes place inside the flower. Okay, I hope you all understood today's session. Who has not yet subscribed to my channel, kindly subscribe and share the videos with your friends. Okay, thank you for watching the video.